Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're going to continue with the Chaga series. So in previous videos we studied the processing of Chaga, so one of the ways that I process it down. We also did a hot water extraction where we made a tea, Chaga tea, and today we're going to do an alcohol extraction using the Chaga fungus. So bear with me and we'll get right into it. So we have everything that we're going to need here for this next step. This is just the alcohol extraction portion of the process. In the end, I'm going to end up doing a dual extraction. So I'm going to be combining the results of this alcohol extraction with a hot water extraction as well to make a dual extraction tincture. So right now, this is just the first step or the first stage of the process, and that is to do the alcohol extraction. So we have 3 items here. We have our vodka, which is what I'm going to be using for my alcohol. I've got Everclear 190 proof vodka. You don't need anything quite that extreme. You could get away with 100 proof vodka or even less. This is what I had available, and Everclear is very good quality as well. So this is what I'm going to be using today. I also have my chaga, which is processed up. I've got some chunks in here, but it's mostly kind of a powder or a fine grind chaga, and I've done that just for the sake of having more surface area, allowing the alcohol hopefully to penetrate the chaga better and extract more of the elements out of the chaga. You could use chunks of chaga as well, but like I said, just to increase the chances of the vodka penetrating and extracting more of those medicinal compounds, I've processed it down a bit. I also have a container here. This is quite a large container, and typically I would do a larger batch for this alcohol extraction. However, I am limited on the amount of chaga that I have available at this point, and I haven't had the opportunity to go out and harvest more. So I'm only doing a half of a cup of chaga today in this alcohol extraction. So I'm going to put that chaga into my container here. Like I said, it's much larger than I actually need, but I do want a container that I can seal up really well, and this seals very well. So I've got my chaga in there. I'm going to open up my alcohol here, and I'm just going to put enough in that it covers the chaga so that all of the chaga is submerged in the alcohol. Okay, so if I look at that, the chaga is completely submerged. I don't really want to put any more alcohol in there than that, so that will be enough, and then I will seal this up. And we're going to store this for at least, I would say, 8 weeks, and there is some argument as to whether or not you should shake this or mix it up in those 8 weeks. Some people say that you put it aside for 8+ weeks undisturbed, and other people say that you have to mix it up or shake it up. In this case, you know, this is a very full container, so every once in a while, maybe once a day, I'll just give it a little bit of a shake just to move that chaga around and hopefully make sure that that alcohol is soaking in to that chaga. So I'm not too worried about moving it around and disturbing it. Like I said, some people say not to disturb it. If you have any information on that, any scientific evidence that says that you shouldn't be disturbing your chaga extraction, please let me know. But this seems to work, so that's what I'm going to go with today. Now, this is the first process because the final product of this is actually going to be a dual extraction. So right now, today, what I have here is just the alcohol extraction. And then this is the first stage. The second stage, I'm going to do a hot water extraction and hopefully end up with a dual extraction in the end. So I'll combine the alcohol extraction with the hot water extraction. And when we get to that part, I'll go over your mixing, your portions as to what percentage you're going to want of alcohol, how to figure that out, and how to make your tincture the strength. So we have our container sealed up now. The only concern I have is that I do have a lot of air in here because I haven't filled up this container very much. So I'm hoping that's not going to affect it or cause any sort of evaporation or anything like that. But I guess this is a bit of an experiment for myself as well. So we'll see what happens with that. The next thing that I'm going to do is label my container. And the reason I do this is because if I have multiple extractions, sometimes of different fungi, sometimes of different medicines, or multiple extractions with different start dates, I like to label it just so that I don't lose track of when I need to sort of go on to the next stage with this. So I'm going to label it. Here I've got my chaga so that I know what it is. The date, March 29th, 2020, and then that way if I lose track of when I started this process, I can just figure out how long it's been sitting based on the date that I have on the container, and then that it's an alcohol extraction as opposed to, say, a water extraction or some other form of extraction. So that's just personal preference, that, something that I do, and I will do it with this batch just because I have a few different things on the go right now. Now, if you watched my previous video on the hot water extraction with chaga, you will note that I mentioned the reason that we're doing both extractions, and that being because chaga has compounds or components that are water soluble and water insoluble. So we already drew out a bunch of the water soluble compounds when we did the hot water extraction, but we left in all of those water insoluble compounds, and that's why we're doing the alcohol extraction, to pull out all of those compounds that we didn't get out from a hot water extraction. The chaga I used in this batch was actually a fresh batch, so it wasn't the batch that I used for the tea, although I could do that. I used a fresh batch for this alcohol extraction, but I will use that same batch once I'm done with the alcohol extraction to do the tea, and then combine those to do the alcohol extraction. So right now with this alcohol extraction, we are attempting to pull out all of those betulinic acids and phytosterols and all of those alcohol soluble or water insoluble compounds. So we'll check on this again in about 8 weeks, maybe more, we'll see, and then we'll move on to the next stage. So it's been about 8 weeks, actually a little bit more than 8 weeks since I put this this chaga into the alcohol extraction, and I just shook it up about once, maybe twice a day. The odd time I did forget, so I might have missed a day or two here and there. There's not much in here, so I don't know if I really needed to wait the full 8 weeks or not, but I did just to be safe. And like I said, it was a little bit more than 8 weeks. So we're ready now to filter this out, and then we're going to use the same chaga as I mentioned previously, the same chaga from this alcohol extraction when we do the tea extraction to do the dual extraction. So we'll combine those two together. So for right now, we're just going to filter this out. So you're going to need a few things for this next step. One is you're going to need another container once you filter out your alcohol to put it into. You're going to need something to use to filter your extraction. So you can use what I'm using right now, which is the same thing I used for my tea, is some cheesecloth. You can also use other fabric and such as well. You can use coffee filters if you don't have anything else, anything better to use. These are just some plastic pieces I got from, I think this was from one of those heated TV dinner kind of things. And then this was from like a cheese making kit. And they've got little holes and such. And you can always use a combination of your coffee filters in there or some cheesecloth as well. Just whatever you have that will do the job. Thing that I forgot to mention is you're going to want something to measure your alcohol extraction with, and those measurements are going to depend on the alcohol that you use for your extraction. So for this particular batch, I used Everclear 190 proof vodka, and it's 95% alcohol. And typically people will do a 1 part to 1 part mixture when they do their dual extraction. So they'll do 1 part alcohol extraction to 1 part hot water extraction. I'm not going to do that today because at a 95% alcohol, 1-to-1 ratio would give me around 47.5% alcohol in my final tincture, and that's a much higher content than I actually need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2 parts hot water extraction to 1 part alcohol extraction, and that should give me roughly around 23.75% alcohol, I want to say, and that's right in the range that I want. So the recommended range that I've always been told for a chaga extraction, alcohol extraction, is around the 20% mark. And at 20% alcohol content, that's enough to preserve your chaga tincture pretty much indefinitely. And if you go a little bit over, that's fine. You know, I'm probably going to hit around the 20 to 25% range. That's kind of where I'm going. A little bit under, you'll still be okay. It's still a high enough content to preserve it, but the 20% mark is kind of the ideal mark. So if I end up a little bit under the 23.75, that's perfectly fine. I'm just going to go with 20 to 25% alcohol content. So the next step is going to be to filter this out. So I've just got my piece of plastic here. It does have holes on it, but these holes are a little bit big for the powder. So I'm just going to place some cheesecloth on it just to make sure that the powder doesn't seep through. So we're just going to pour this extraction into there. And by the time I was done filtering, I ended up with about 1/3 of a cup of alcohol extraction. So like I said, this is a very small batch. This is not going to make much, but generally I'm just using it for myself, and maybe I'll share it with family. So I don't really need a lot of my chaga extraction when I'm done. So 1/3 of a cup of the alcohol extraction. So I'm going to do roughly around 2/3 of a cup of hot water extraction. And like I said, you don't have to be exact. You want to get roughly between 20 to 25% alcohol content. If you're a little bit over, that's fine. And if you're a little bit under, that's fine as well, as long as there's enough to preserve your tincture in the end. So I've already filtered this out. I'm going to go ahead and put this into a container. I'm using this one here. It's very similar to the other one that I had the extraction sitting in, and it seals up really nicely, so my alcohol isn't going to evaporate while I'm doing the tea extraction. The tea extraction can take anywhere from a day, if I'm doing it as a dual extraction, to a couple of days. So I'm going to put this in here to store it for now while I do the hot water extraction. So I'm just going to pour that in there. And as you can see, I did get a little bit of chaga powder in there, but that's fine. Seal it up. And we're good to go for that step, and we're going to move on to the next step, which is the hot water extraction. So the next stage of the process is to do the hot water extraction. So we've already filtered out the alcohol extraction. We're going to do the hot water extraction, and I used the chaga from that alcohol. I put it in the pot here, and I added 3/4 of a cup of water because I want my final tea amount to be around 2/3, and as I boil this and steep it and simmer it, I'm going to reduce it down, so I'm going to lose some of that water that I added to it. So I went with about 3/4 of a cup, and by the time I'm done, I should end up with about the 2/3 of a cup of water of tea in the end. So I did go a little bit over the amount. And I'm using distilled water here that I just got from the grocery store. I don't want to use tap water or anything with chlorine and a lot of chemicals and such in it. So I went out and I just bought a jug of distilled water, which is what I usually use when I do my tea extractions. So this is very similar to what I would normally do for a tea extraction. So I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to bring this to a boil, and then I'm going to reduce the heat and I'm going to simmer it. And I'm going to do that for at least, well, I'll bring it to a boil and I'll simmer it for quite a while, and as it reduces down, once I've reduced it down a bit, then I'll turn it off and I'll just let it sit overnight for sure. And tomorrow I might do the process again, so do it maybe once or twice. You can do it 3 times, just to keep heating up and then reducing that down. And then the final result is what I'm going to use. I'm going to combine with my alcohol extraction. So in the end, I should end up with roughly 2/3 of a cup of tea. So my tea is at a steady boil now, so I can reduce the heat and just let it simmer for a while now, and just reduce the tea down. And as I was heating this up and getting it to a boil, I could actually smell the alcohol, and you could see a lot of steam coming from here. So that was all the alcohol evaporating out of the hot water extraction. And I can't smell it anymore, so more than likely all the alcohol is gone by now. And I've reduced the heat down, and we'll just let it simmer for a while. So I finished doing the chaga hot water extraction last night, and it didn't take as long as it usually does. typically when I do a batch of chaga tea, I do about a gallon at a time, and this was a much smaller batch, so it actually didn't take that long to reduce down that chaga tea. So I did the process. I brought it up to a boil. Once it boiled, I reduced the heat and just simmered for a little while until it until it reduced down. And that didn't take very long, and then I turned it off, left it for a few hours, came back and did the process over again. And so that part has already been done. If you want more detail on how to make chaga tea, I have another video, an older video on that. So check that out. For the sake of this video, I've already filtered it out and prepared it, so I'll show you what I have ready here. So what I have here is the alcohol extraction that we did earlier, and there is 1/3 of a cup of the chaga alcohol extraction here. And then I also have the hot water extraction, or the tea. And by the time I boiled it and reduced it, I ended up with just under 2/3 of a cup of chaga tea. So my ratio was going to be 1/3 to 2/3. It's going to be a little bit off. It'll give me more, I would say closer to about 25% alcohol content by the time I combine these two. So that's right in the range that I was aiming for anyway, so 25% is perfectly fine. So all we're going to do now, this chaga tea has already been filtered and everything like that. We're just going to combine the two, hence the dual extraction. So I've just got my alcohol extraction here. I'm just going to pour it right in with the tea, the hot water extraction. And so now I've got both in there. And I could stir that up if I wanted to, but I don't think that's really all that necessary. There is a little bit of chaga still kind of floating around in there. I probably should have filtered it a little bit better. And then what I have in this container here, that's all of the chaga that I used for the alcohol extraction, then for the hot water extraction, and I dried it out again because I can still use this again, at least for a couple of teas. It was still getting a really nice dark brew, so I'll keep using that. And then I've got my bottles here. These are just your amber typical droppers, and I put it in here because really with the dual extraction, it's not like the tea. You're not going to be drinking this. You're only going to be taking a couple of drops a day, or maybe, depends on each person's dosage is different, right? So I won't get into the details on dosage in this video, but we can always go over that in another video. So I'm just going to take my bottle here. This actually comes with a cool little funnel, nice metal funnel there. So I will just pour that into each of the bottles. And then I will label these bottles as a chaga dual extraction, just so that I know for my own reference what's in each bottle. So even though this was a very small batch, like by the time I combine the two, I'm just under 3/4 of a cup of dual extraction here, and that's not a lot, but it's gonna last me a very long time. And even if I share it with maybe my family members or friends, it's still gonna last me a very long time. So there's no point for me doing large batches. Usually when I do the tea, I do, like I said, about a gallon at a time because I drink it every day, and I usually have a few cups a day, a couple cups. And just as a disclaimer, obviously, if you're going to be making this and using it, please research dosage, because you don't want to take too much. As with pretty much everything in life, all things in moderation, so please do your own research on dosages. But that's pretty much the process. I don't think you need to watch me fill each of these bottles. So thank you for watching so far, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and hopefully you learned something from it. Feel free to leave comments. So my final product is 6 of these dropper size bottles, and I can't recall at the moment what the size is, but I will put it in the description. So I have 6 of these. I've labeled them. So this says Chaga dual extraction, and then I also put the date, and that's the date that I bottled them, just in case I have multiple batches. then I can make sure to rotate and be using up the old ones first. So I do the alcohol extraction, which pulls out the water insoluble compounds, and the hot water extraction, which pulls out the water soluble compounds. And in the end, we end up with a product that has utilized the majority of, if not all of those compounds from the fungus. So you're getting the most value out of your chaga. Like I said, please do your own research on dosages. Each person is different. What I may tolerate, you may not. But I just wanted to show you what we ended up with as a final product, and why we went through that whole process. So hopefully you found this video helpful. Please, if you did so, like and subscribe as well, and we'll catch you on the next video. Bye for now and have a great day.